What's up, Jets fans, and welcome to episode 14 of JetNation Live. We are your hosts, Dylan Tereman and Glenn Naughton. Had a bit of a technical issue, so slight delayed start here, but we're here. We're both here. We can hear each other well. So the Jets, unfortunately, fall to the Minnesota Vikings 27-22. I don't want to say that this is a game that slipped away from them, much like the two Patriots losses this season, but it was a disappointing loss for many reasons. To get down first and goal, 2 minutes remaining, down 5 points with 3 timeouts. I mean, the drop by Berrios on fourth down, I understand it was an improvised route, according to Mike White, but it's so unfortunate that they weren't able to complete the comeback. They were down, I believe, 20-3 at one point. So all in all, it was a disappointing loss, but I think the messaging coming out of this game is way more positive than in past losses, especially this season. And I think that's the most important thing. So, Glenn, what are your thoughts knowing that the road to the playoffs for the New York Jets is just a bit tougher now at 7-5 in the seventh seed in the AFC playoff picture?
Yeah, I'm tempted to say, after that game, I was like, that's the playoffs are gone. There's
Mhm.
you got to kind of put it out of your head now. So much has to go right. So many good teams fighting for one spot, and I'm trying to put it out of my head. Of course, mathematically, it's still possible. Things could still break their way,
Mhm.
but it's a matter of. I think for me, the thing is, I don't see them beating Buffalo twice.
Mhm.
And that's kind of, I guess that's the way I should say it. I don't feel like the Vikings game knocked them out of the playoffs, but I just thought to myself, you're not beating the Bills twice, and that's what's going to knock you out of the playoffs. And listen, I always say, man, those first couple days after a loss, I catastrophize everything. But I just, you hear it all the time, and it's so true in the league. If you're a good team, it's hard. Even if you are a good team, it's hard to beat another good team twice. If they lose to the Bills this Sunday, that'll almost put the nail on the coffin. But the couple of good things they have going for them is that the Chargers aren't really lighting the world on fire. That's one of the teams they're competing with. The Raiders are heating up a little bit, but it's how much faith do you have in Josh McDaniel? For them to keep that going. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know, but there were obviously some big losses by teams who they're competing with after the Jets lost. So you felt a little bit better about that. But I think one of the key points you made is the fact that it was a loss, but it wasn't like these other the Patriots losses where you just granted they were a dud in the red zone, no denying that. But like in those Pats losses, or at least that second loss to the Pats, and a lot of their losses this year, they just couldn't move the ball. Like you just felt like it was going to take a miracle to get into the red zone, let alone score a touchdown. So some imperfections, of course. The Mike White throw could have been better, but still a catchable ball for Berrios. I know a lot of. I mean, you can tell who's behind Mike White and who's not by the fans who are saying that was an impossible catch. That would have been the most you
Right.
know degree of difficulty was 10. That would have been the most difficult catch in NFL history. There's somebody sent me a picture of like the still shot of where Mike White should have put the ball versus where he did put the ball, but like they cut off the part where you can see the linebacker on the other side of the play, like to make the window look bigger because if he leaves him
Mhm.
too much, the linebacker on the other side can make a play on it. So the window was a little. So people like making excuses for the drop, but putting everything on Mike White's. It's funny. Like I see these people like they were absolutely fine with Zach Wilson launching the ball into the fifth row on a screen pass. That was totally acceptable. But Mike
Yeah.
White misses on a touchdown by a foot, and it's like, oh, I told you this guy sucked. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Give me a break.
And I said this to you offline in our group chat on Twitter, and I know that this is exactly how it's going to sound if you just pull a clip of us going back a couple weeks ago when the Jets were winning with Zach Wilson and he was throwing for 110, 125, and we
Yeah,
said we'd rather 110 in a win than 350 in a loss. And
right.
after what we saw from Mike White, who ended the game 31 of 57, 369, two interceptions that came on the first and last drive of the game, and the rushing touchdown from 1 yard out. I'm cool with Mike White throwing for 360 in those types of games if that's the type of loss we're going to have. I mean, and I know
Yeah,
it
you,
does
you,
sound a
you
little
could. You still
hypocritical,
have a
but
chance.
well, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying he keeps you competitive and he keeps you in the game and he's making plays.
Exactly. And I know we both said that we didn't really get to watch the full all 22 this week, but that second half almost comeback by Mike White was pretty special. Obviously, the first half,
Some really good throws.
excuse me, he had a couple throws that were a bit high, a bit behind the target, and I think that led to the interception. I know you posted it as well, so many others have that Corey Davis was almost basically a DPI on the first interception, and
Oh, for sure, for
Clete
sure.
Blakeman just missed it. And I even put in my pregame article, Clete Blakeman, a whole post about him and how much DPI he calls, and he just to not call it on the first drive of the game. Like, I understand you don't want to throw the flags early and set the tone like that, but it was pretty blatant, even on the TV copy, that it was defensive pass interference. So for
Yep.
Mike White to throw a deflected pick on the first drive, and then he even explained it on the last interception on the final drive of the game. He just doesn't want to end the game with the ball in his
Yeah,
hands,
you're just
put
trying
it
to make
up
just
for his
put it into the end
playmakers.
zone. That's
Exactly. And
yeah,
I respect that. So to look
absolutely.
at the box score and say, oh, 360 and a loss, it doesn't tell the full story. And I think Mike White had plenty of good throws, and we'll get into his long-term outlook on the team. But for this game in general, I think he did plenty enough for us to say, okay, for the at least remainder of 2022 season, whether it's playoffs or not, Mike
Yep,
White is the guy barring
yep.
injury. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And, we say it all the time. You can't look at a box score to get a feel for how a game went
Yep.
because you can even put it the other way. In some of these wins where Zach's throwing for, 180, 190, he throws a swing pass to Brees Hall that he takes 70 yards
Mhm.
and it beefs up his passing numbers and really, and it really, I guess the one to Brees wasn't even a swing. It was a little bit more downfield, but it was about a 10-yard pass, 15-yard
Yeah.
pass. Where Brees does all the work. He makes 5 guys miss, and he's breaking tackles inside the red zone. So, it, the, as you said, you've got to see the game and see how things unfold. We've seen games where a quarterback will make 1 or 2 good throws, and they're good enough that the box score looks nice. But if you see the game, you're like, well, actually, those were the only 2 good throws the guy made all day. And, a couple 50, 60 yarders, and then the box score looks pretty, but in reality, the guy didn't play well, as a whole. And that's, and this is the thing with the, we're seeing it, as I said before, the same thing with Mike White, where anything, any imperfection is like the guy gets blown up by the fans who are more interested in Zach Wilson than they are in the Jets. They want to kill Mike White for missing a throw, um, but he's making enough of them that the offense is moving the ball and they're scoring points. The red zone stuff I think was catastrophic. And sorry, I've gone off on a separate tangent. But yeah, it's frustrating to see this team play, especially on the road against this Vikings team.
Hmm.
That's they've got the record they have, and you'd love to win a road game against an opponent of this quality, and just didn't happen, unfortunately. But I don't put it on Mike White. I think that he, like I said, he could be better. But I think the with you saying he's the guy for this year, I agree 100%. Um, and I don't know if you were going to bring this up. We didn't talk a lot pre-show this week, so I don't know if you
Hmm.
were going to bring this up. But I was just going to mention, I think that, and I think we may have discussed this in a brief chat. Um, the thing with the t-shirts before the game,
Yeah.
with the Jets players wearing Mike F and White t-shirts, getting off the bus. That's one thing. It's another thing to have the team's official Twitter account send it out.
Yep.
Like people are like, oh, so what? They're supporting their quarterback. No, there's supporting your quarterback, and then there is like doing it in a way to humiliate the other quarterback. And that's, I
Mhm.
mean, you can't, I don't know who would have to be running your social media account to not realize how that looks, the optic on that. I believe I even heard, who was it? Was it Steve Young on Michael K or so? I think that's where it was. And they asked Steve Young, like, how do you take and do you take that as a dig at Zach Wilson by the Jets?
Mhm.
And I'm paraphrasing, but Steve Young was like, well, how else could you take it?
Right.
Um, and again, like I said, people are saying, oh, he's supporting his teammates. Take whatever it is, whoever you are listening, whatever it is you do for a living. Like, imagine your job hires another guy that does the same job you do.
Hmm.
And they're like, oh, well, this week you're going to do a little less and he's going to step in and do your job. And
Yep.
then, like, the next week, every one of your coworkers shows up wearing a shirt with that dude's name on it saying, like, how awesome he is. Wouldn't you
Hmm.
be like, what the hell's going on here? Like, It's clearly a move. Like, hey guys, where'd you get those shirts? Oh, the boss gave them to us. Like, oh, that's nice. All right, that's fantastic. Yeah, he put up a
Mm-hmm.
billboard on I-95 too, to tell all of our customers how awesome the new guy is. Would you be like, okay, yeah, they're just supporting him. That's nothing to do with me. You'd be like, oh my god,
Yeah,
I'm on my way out. So to my
yeah.
point, like we said last week, is Zach Wilson done as a Jet? And I think we both said no. But this makes me wonder, man. They're that's a big thing. I mean, like today's environment, everything's so controlled. Everything is
Oh
planned.
yeah.
Like interviews and responses. You listen to the players talk after the Zach comments. That's all scripted answers. It's all scripted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sometimes guys do go off script a little bit.
Sure.
But which that's another thing. Garrett Wilson. Last time Zach Wilson plays, oh, we got to get this all fixed. Now this week, what do you think of Mike White? I'll go to war with that guy. He's a
Yeah.
dog. God, I love
It's
him.
amazing.
That's a pretty strong contrast from we got to get this fixed to I'll go to war with this guy. The player, without saying we don't want Zach back in the huddle, the players are saying we don't want Zach back in the huddle.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your first original point of they're just supporting their quarterback, that's all well and good when maybe one player wears a T-shirt, like when CJ Uzama wore the Time Player
Right.
Man of the Year for Zach Wilson. Like that's
Right.
supporting your teammate, laughing about it. Like one person doing it. When 7, 8, 9 teammates or the whole offense or whatever is wearing the Mike F and White shirt, and he's wearing Tyler Conklin's T-shirt, like it just proves, like, on even to the outside world, they're showing us that they have a better chemistry with Mike White in that locker room. And they're, like you said, ready to go to war for him. To go from this shit is sorry to I'm ready to go to war within a matter of 2-3 weeks. Like, good for Garrett Wilson for getting like his, flowers because he's breaking out and he's absolutely
Absolutely.
deserving of it. But it's just crazy how quickly the whole locker room feel has changed about it. And I didn't want to make this so much of a Zach Wilson versus Mike White thing, but when the whole season is on the line for both quarterbacks and only one is really deserving of the job, it's really hard to say that the other guy who's now in street clothes for the past 3 weeks can do much to breach back into this locker room and break this chemistry mold that they have established. And I even said it to you, like, even if he implodes against Buffalo, I still feel like there's a 99.9% chance he should start against Detroit. And I'm not sure if you feel the same way, but I'm pretty sure that's how most fans should feel after watching this past game and I came away with so many positives out of this loss that it felt like almost unusual for me to be this positive. And you said it, that yes, losing to Minnesota makes it a lot like tougher, especially if you lose to Buffalo, because you felt like with these adjusted expectations, winning one of these games was a must to get into the playoffs. And it's possible to do it with a loss to Buffalo this week. Obviously, I feel like you'd have to win 3, if not the remaining 4 of your games. But I look at this game and I come away with too many positives from Mike White. A couple of the throws, obviously the deflected interception. There was the second deflected almost interception, which was really a Tyler Conklin drop. And I wanted to highlight Corey Davis on that one real quick because he blasted the defender and the defender just lost the ball. He almost picked it off the second time and Corey Davis shut that down. But it was a decent throw from Mike White. It was a little high like we talked about, but Mike White had another huge throw to CJ Uzama on the corner route that went for about 23, 25 yards. And these are just things that you don't see with Zach Wilson. So it's like, even to the eye test, anybody should say Mike White is the guy. And you talked about it with the red zone efficiency, 1 for 6 in the red zone. I don't fully blame Mike White. Obviously, you can say he touches the ball every play. He went 6 of 17 for 24 yards and a pick or whatever his terrible stats were for the day. But that is also because of the play calling. And I'm not one to, really get on Mike LaFleur a ton, but I felt like this game, when they got inside the 20, they really struggled. And obviously 1 for 6 shows it. And even the touchdown that they did score, 7 guys had to push Mike White across the line.
Yeah.
So they barely got through. So obviously it can't all fall on Mike White. What were your thoughts about Mike LaFleur, especially when they got into the red zone? And do you think that this is something that maybe Mike LaFleur had plays more schemed up for Zach and now he's adjusting on the fly to Mike White in the red zone? Or what do you think the reason for the red zone mishaps were?
Well, I hate to say it, and I was going to bring up this topic, and the red zone is part of the reason. So tie it in with the red zone.
Mhm.
I think that there's a lack of confidence from Mike LaFleur in that interior offensive line.
Okay.
I mean the tackles too. It's not as if I mean he ran it up the middle more than I would have liked, but I feel like on the goal line when you want to punch it in, you generally want to go up the middle. And I look at I look at a guy like Laken Tomlinson, and I feel like no, he's not as bad as he was in week one when he was horrendous,
Hmm.
but he's not been a guy that's played up to the hype or the contract. And I feel like if he is, like when you pay a guy that much money and you have that many trips inside the red zone, that many plays from the one or two of them you run behind him, and they wouldn't run it. Like they wouldn't even try. But they did get too cute. I think the play I liked the least was the end around to Berrios. That
Yeah.
these long developing plays. I wasn't a huge fan of. I didn't love going. See, I mean, a lot of people are killing him for going empty backfield, which I get. I don't love that either.
Hmm.
But the chance to score was still there, if everybody executes.
Right.
So it's kind of a well, we can get mad that if people do their jobs, the play works. But I think that was the biggest. I don't know what point it was, but at some point I'm watching that game and I'm thinking they're just scared to run it up the middle. They just won't.
Yep.
They tried the sneaks, of course, but you didn't see. And even when they did run it up the middle with the sneak, Mike White got stuffed and had to take a step back and take another route into the end zone.
Yep.
So it just kind of went to show that even when they did go up the middle, it didn't really work out. And I think that is why this team is, as well as they're doing and as banged up as they've been at tackle. It's a topic for the offseason, but I just wonder now, is Laken Tomlinson back next year? Because to cut him after June 1st, it's only like a $4 million hit, and they save a
It's
chunk.
workable. Yep.
Yeah, they save like 8 or 9 million, and they take a $4 million hit. So I don't know that he'll be back at his current price. And it's a shame because one of the like locker room guy, high character guy. You want to see him do well.
Hmm.
But I think he's been a big disappointment. And of course, the tackle situation now is a complete. Just when you think it can't get any crazier, it does. Um, but those were my thoughts on red zone. The number one thing is I'm not sure Michael LaFleur believes in this interior line, and I can't 100% fault him for that.
Hmm.
But he did get a little too cute. I would have liked to have seen some red zone targets. Like these are situations where I look at like, can you not have a few plays that where Jeremy Ruckert gets involved? Like
Right.
look, dude, we're just gonna have you. We've got 4 red zone plays we're going to install that you're going to be a part of.
Hmm.
Like I don't know why. I don't know if there was a particular play or set of plays that made me a fan. But ever since I was a kid, like I'm a big fan of like red zone, like play action, hit the tight end, like around the goal line.
Hmm.
Tallest dudes, play action, hopefully bring some linebackers in, and then hit the 6'5", 6'6" receiver, wherever, however you draw it up. But I love the tight end targets off the play action in the red zone. Didn't see any of that. Didn't see the tight ends at all, really, on that sequence that
Hmm.
I can recall. I may be mistaken. But I remember at some point thinking they're afraid to run it up the middle. And why don't you have a few plays drawn up for Rucker to get involved here? Even if it's as a blocker, like they don't have a true fullback. He
Yep.
might be the best fullback on the roster, but I'm like, you could use a fullback right now. And if Rucker's your guy, fine. I'm having flashbacks to when Rex handed the ball off to Sheldon Richardson for a touchdown inside the red zone, inside the
Hmm.
5, just to get
Yeah.
a
Get
big
creative.
body moving forward with power. Because they don't have that on the roster. I mean, Bam is the closest thing to it, but just not a great job overall by LaFleur. And the personnel packages I wasn't thrilled with, and I'd like to see Ruckert or any of the tight ends get involved in that spot.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fair point that you brought up because I didn't even think of it that way of him not trusting the interior offensive line. And I'll take it even a step further that with Michael Carter outside of maybe Bam Knight, I don't know if he trusted any of his running backs either. I think James Robinson is somewhat in this doghouse of a committee now. He's kind of being relegated to the third RB on the roster. And I think he took 9 snaps in the game total. So
Would he
like
have 2 carries, I think?
exactly. So he's getting far outsnapped by Bam Knight, and Bam
Oh,
Knight is definitely a
he's
quality
killing it,
back,
man.
and we'll
He's killing
definitely
it.
talk about him. But yeah, to not give your running backs a chance from inside the 5 yard line at multiple chances, like at least on first or second down, just run the ball. I know it's cliche. Oh, everybody knows you're going to run the ball now, but just do it. Just be the bigger team. Just strength on strength. Your offensive line should push back a little bit, get some yards, and And as you were talking, I literally wrote down ruck fullback, because even if he isn't in the passing game in the red zone, he's absolutely motion him into the backfield or out of the backfield and do whatever. And even the spread looks in the red zone, I'm cool with that. I'm okay with the spread looks if you start with the running back in the backfield and motion him out. That way you get your man zone indicator out of the way. You understand more of what the defense is trying to give you. Don't come out in that spread look and just kind of guess on the fly. And I feel like that's kind of where some issues might have like been created. But all in all, yeah, I think it was a big, too cute game for Mike LaFleur, and it might be one of his worst red zone games since he's been on the team. And like,
Yeah.
even so, like they were fine. They moved the ball outside the 20s, fine. 370 yards passing. They had 486 total yards to the Vikings 287. So the game plan was fine. I just, like you said, he got a little too cute in the red zone, and it's it's a knock on Mike LaFleur, but it's not like this is something we've consistently pointed to and said, oh, he's got a problem in the red zone. Maybe Zach Wilson had an issue in the red zone and the offense sputtered, but it seems like Mike White can produce. So all in all, I'm not too stressed about Mike LaFleur. Another guy I did want to highlight, obviously, we got to talk about Garrett Wilson. He's pretty much the best wide receiver, maybe outside of, I'm trying to compare him to a former Jets wide receiver that's like given us this much excitement so early on, and I really can't do it. It's so
No,
hard to pinpoint,
not
and
like
I'm
this.
young, so it's
You,
really
you know,
hard for me.
there have been
But
guys, I go back as far as Keyshawn, who this team is
sure.
or who Garrett Wilson is chasing now in terms of the team receiving record, and for a rookie, and it
Hmm.
looks like he'll break that.
Oh yeah.
But Keyshawn, the thing I always said about Keyshawn, um, and Keyshawn had a little bit of an ego on him. He thought he was like Randy Moss and Jerry Rice rolled into one, and that's before Randy Moss was even in the league. But well, Keyshawn was a big bodied guy, like tall guy, good possession guy. Like the thing I loved about Keyshawn, like you could not question his toughness.
Hmm.
You would see that dude take some shot. One particular play I remember years ago against the Pats, like just over the middle and took a shot, not to the back, but like to the ribs, like and back when guys hit. And he got blasted in the ribs and he held on, and that was like the first play where you saw like this guy is no joke. But Keyshawn was not a run after the catch guy. Keyshawn was like he was
Hmm.
going to make the catch, and that's as far as he was going. I think all of his touchdowns one year, if I'm not mistaken, or it seemed like 90% of his touchdowns were like sort of red zone or like he was already in the end zone. And
Hmm.
I felt like the thing he was great at was contested balls. Like if you threw a ball up and there were 4 or 5, like a Hail Mary type, like Keyshawn would probably come down with it. He had these long arms and he had great hands. So Keyshawn was a threat in that way, but Keyshawn was not going to catch the ball and take it 70 yards. I think I saw him make a play like that once in his career, and it was a member of the Bucks. Remember, I said I lived in Tampa, watched a ton of Bucks football, while the Jets weren't on, and I watched Keyshawn particularly because that was when the Jets had just traded him to the Bucks, and like I think they were playing the Lions, and the Lions corner like fell on his face while the ball was in the air, and I remember watching and thinking, oh, that's probably the longest play of Keyshawn's career. Like he made the catch, the DB fell down, and Keyshawn took it like 60 yards. But Garrett Wilson is just on another level. Like the quickness, that in and out of his breaks, the way he's able to shake defenders, and he's got DBs falling over trying to cover him, and then his ability after, the stop and go, plant the foot, stop his momentum, start, the stop and start ability. He's incredible. I haven't watched, as we said, we haven't seen the all 22. The one thing, and I hate to nitpick for a guy who had such a great day, but on the big catch and run, the 70-yard or whatever it was, from the live angle, it looked like Denzel Mims had an all right block on the defender to the outside.
Hmm.
And if Garrett Wilson would have stayed to the inside, he would have had a shot at the end zone. But he kind of voluntarily went out and around and went behind the guy and sort of made the sideline an extra defender. And I felt like he cheated himself out of some yards that he had a more direct route to the end zone. But again, amazing day. And I think he's gonna I think he's going to win Rookie of the Year if he keeps playing the way. I think it's a shame. I think if Mike White had been playing all year, I think he'd run away with Rookie of the Year already. But because he had Zach Wilson for 6 weeks, he's now got a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, and you even put out the tweet about Garrett Wilson's stats if you extrapolated it over a full season with Mike White or even Joe Flacco
Yeah.
at quarterback versus Zach Wilson. And it's truly night and day, and he would be runaway. And right now,
He'd
I
be on pace
think
for 1,500 yards. Yeah.
exactly. And I haven't looked at the updated odds for Rookie of the Year, but we talked about it on the very first episode of JetNation Live when we did our like predictions, bold predictions for the show, and we
Yeah.
both said offensive and defensive Rookie of the Year were on this team. And so far, I mean, ESPN came out with the rookie rankings yesterday morning or this morning, and Sauce was number 1, Chris Olave was number 2, and Garrett Wilson was number 3. So by all intents and purposes, if the Saints, struggle down the stretch and Garrett Wilson and Mike White continue to hit it off, absolutely. The Jets are looking at I know Sauce at this point, it's almost like a no contest for defensive rookie of the year. He's in minus odds and everybody else is in plus. So it's not really a competition there. Offensive rookie of the year is still up for grabs, but Garrett Wilson is certainly deserving. And I have a couple stats here. 4 of the last 5 games with 90 plus yards. He only had one such game the entire rest of the season, and that was in week 2 against the Browns. So, exactly, with Joe Flacco. So he's absolutely booming recently. You talked about it, that big yak play, and there were the downfield blocks by Mims and Davis both. And yes, you said it. I feel like he did cheat himself a little bit. He didn't even think he stepped out of bounds, so he thought he had scored on the play originally, which is really unfortunate for him. And obviously they weren't able to score on that drive. I think they settled for one of their field goals after that, or maybe it was the Mike White scramble. I'm not I haven't fully rewatched, as you can tell. And I don't even think that was Garrett's best play. I think his best play from a route running perspective was the overthrow on the deep double move that he beat Pat Pete on.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait to clip that out on the all 22 because Pat Pete looks stunned, like similarly to that first play against Buffalo with Sauce and how his foot kind of just got put in the ground and he just stuck and he didn't know what to do. And Garrett Wilson just blew right by him. Unfortunately, it was, a couple yards too far. And to think that Garrett Wilson probably could have ended the day with 200 something yards is just ridiculous. And he won the Pepsi Zero Sugar Rookie of the Week, 9 times out of 13 for the Jets now at this point. But to think that it could have been even more is just crazy for Garrett Wilson. So he's already 3rd most rookie receiving yards as well. I'm not sure who the other one is, but I know Chris Olave is ahead of him. I'm not sure who the other one is. So yeah, I think he's absolutely deserving. I wanted to talk about Corey Davis a little bit. He had an up and down game. He had the holding on the first play that blew out the Bam big run on the first play. He also had a false start. But then he did have some big first down receptions over the middle. And like I talked about, the interception that he negated by just absolutely smashing the defender. I believe it was Cam Bynum, your guy Cam Bynum, that almost came away with the pick and he just crushed him. So Corey Davis had a bit of an
one who interfered too with Davis early in the game.
Yeah, exactly. So they were kind of going at each other all game there. And then the last guy I wanted to talk about, and he's also part of the other, the hidden gems that this team has uncovered this season. And that's Zonovan Knight. I mean, to do what this guy has done over the first 2 games of his career after being a practice squad guy, a healthy scratch for the first 3 or 4 weeks that he was called up to the 53. Now, I mean, they gave him the start, and I don't see any reason. I mean, even with Michael Carter back, he's at minimum a 1B in this system to Michael Carter. And I didn't write down his full stats here, but I mean, every run just seemed like he was
the way he runs,
even getting so much yards and then putting his head down to create contact to just force more yards. So what were your thoughts on Bam Knight's big day as I pull up his stats here?
I mean, listen, I think we all want Jets players to do well, but when there's guys that we sort of project pre-draft as possible Jets players or targets, Bam Knight was one of those guys that I tweeted out and said, this is a guy that Jets should consider on day 3 because I thought they would take him back. I thought he'd be a day 3 pick. Obviously, he didn't go at all, but loved his style in college. I love that he's again one of those guys, does a lot of things well, really good hands out of the backfield. We haven't even really seen that here up to this point, but he did a really good job at NC State catching the ball. Does, as we said, he can run inside, he can run outside. I like his ability to cut back and accelerate and hit his top speed quickly. I think did Robert Saleh say he was clocked in the 4.3s on that run, on the big run, his biggest run.
He did mention something about his speed.
Yeah. So if that's the case, he's a lot, even though I like the idea of bringing him in, I didn't think he was that fast of a guy. And I even said And I think I mentioned this, a few weeks ago when people were saying, don't trade for Robinson, give Bam Knight a chance. I was like, well, look, even as a guy who I watched a lot of and as a guy I wanted them to draft, I thought Robinson is the proven 1,000-yard back. And if the Jets are making this trade, they don't feel like he's ready. So Bam Knight isn't James Robinson yet. Like,
Right.
because I'm, kind of relying on what the Jets are telling us, which is we've got Bam, we've seen Bam, and we're still giving up a pick to bring somebody else in. So it's like, all right, well, they must see more there. But I think it was obvious. I mean, right away, his first couple carries in his first game, you're like, oh, he does have some juice, and he is sort of ready now, and he is, and it's great. It's another rookie on this team who's contributing in a big way. And as Robert Saleh said, that that's sort of one of the reasons I've always been a fan of multiple backs in the backfield. He's like bringing a guy on at this point, like he's got fresh legs, and it's late in the year. So a guy who can run that well and who doesn't have the wear and tear of a full season on him. I think he's going to have a nice little stretch here, and he deserves it. And I think Robert Saleh said he's not going anywhere. And I think even if he was playing on par with Michael, I think right now I think he's a better back than Michael Carter. But even if they were on par, I'd say he's the more physical guy who's able to take more of a beating, and for that reason alone, he would get the bulk of the carries. But as it stands, he's just clearly the better back, and that's not a knock on Michael Carter. We're both big fans of his as well. I think he's
Right.
Carter's a great character guy, very good player, and again catches it, can run it, catch it. So it's exciting to see another rookie emerge out of this class. I mean, how nice would it be to see him win one of those belts, in the next few weeks?
Oh yeah. And I think it's certainly possible. I mean, obviously Michael Carter is coming back from injury, but you said it right there. I think ever since Breece Hall went down with injury, they've kind of tried to do just a big committee thing. And now I think with the combination of Bam Knight and Michael Carter, you kind of have someone who can do more of the Breece role with Bam. Obviously, he is not Breece Hall. He's not 6'2", 6'1", 6'2", 225 or whatever Breece Hall's measurables are. But as far as getting to the hole, putting his foot in the ground, going, accelerating, and running and taking off on home run plays, Bam Knight is the closest thing to Breece Hall. So yeah, I would love it if he still gets the bulk of the carries while Michael Carter is that change of pace back. While you're talking there, I was able to pull up his stats. He had 15 carries for 90 yards, including that 48-yard run down the left sideline. He had 5 targets, 5 catches for 28 yards. So everything he was thrown was caught. And he had a total of 118 yards, followed up by 103 last week. So that's a total of 221 yards in his first 2 career games for him. So yeah, I think if you keep stacking these games like this and get in the end zone a couple times, that Pepsi Zero Sugar Bell is certainly going to come around Bam Knight's waist. And he talked to the media yesterday or this today or something. I don't know. I listened to it on my way home from work, and he said that he really didn't make the decision himself after being undrafted in the draft this past season. He basically let his agent handle it. His agent is very experienced, and he trusted his agent fully. And he said, I'm going to let you pick where I go, essentially. And he said, the Jets have a good scheme for you. It might not be, the depth order that you want to be, but you'll get, this is the scheme you want to be in. And he trusted him. And I think that exactly the skill set match. So I think it's just kind of the stars aligning. And like you said, when James Robinson was traded for, anybody could have said, oh, well, Bam Knight, but nobody knew what Bam Knight was going to be until he actually showed it on the field. So it's very easy to say now that he's done well, oh, we didn't need James Robinson, but maybe we still do. And down the stretch, having all 4 running backs healthy is really going to help the Jets. I mentioned it, New York Niners. That's kind of, they need to be a running back by committee at this point, because that just adds another layer down the stretch of fresh legs, and their defense is going to be tired and your offense is going to be fresh. And it's just going to make it that much easier to run out clock games when they want to just run the ball in the 3rd and 4th quarter. So Bam Knight is somebody I'm certainly intrigued about. I think him, Michael Carter, and Breece Hall should give you a lot to be excited for in 2023. And as far as the run game, obviously you get AVT back, and these guys just could tear it up. And it doesn't really matter who's under center, because you could just hand the ball off 80% of the plays as long as it's working, and you could have success with these 3 guys. So I'm really excited. Was there anybody else that you wanted to highlight on the offensive side of the ball before we kind of turn to defense?
No, I mean, my biggest takeaways were, obviously, like we said, Garrett had a huge day. Bam is going to keep getting carries, and I would have, I mean, the what was it, 31 yarder to Ozama, I think it was 31, may have been somewhere in that range. The over the
Yeah, it was
shoulder.
something like that. Yep.
Yeah, it was a really nice grab. So I would like to see the tight ends involved more. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, but let's get Ruckert involved. That would be my biggest complaint is that I think at this point in the season, it's not like he played at a Division III school and he's
Right.
I played at Ohio State, played big boy football. Have a handful of plays that he can get on the field and try to make a play.
Yeah, and when your draft class is already proven so many hits, I mean, 6 of your 7 guys have made an impact this season. What's the harm of trying that 7th guy? Because even if he isn't that great, you still have 2 guys ahead of him that you can just fill right back in with. But yeah, give this guy an opportunity because I think he would surprise both in the pass and run game, like we
Mhm.
mentioned earlier. All right, flipping over to the defense. I wanted to give a quick welcome back to Sheldon Rankins. He missed the last 2 games with a dislocated elbow. He made his presence felt on the very first play. I went back and started watching the TV copy. I'm about halfway through the second quarter, and on the very first defensive snap, Sheldon Rankins, walked back Ed Ingram right into Kirk Cousins'
Mhm.
lap, forced an incomplete pass. Obviously, it's not a sack or it's not a hit. It's not it's just a pressure. But
Game
like we
changing play
said,
though. Was
it's the
game altering
quality of
play.
the pressure that when you actually go back and look at it, it says it's just a pressure, but it dictated the entire play. And they were in 2nd and 10, 2nd and long from that point
Yep.
on. I believe they ended with a 3-and-out, kicked the field goal. So I just wanted to give a good welcome back to Sheldon Rankins. Other than that, I think the run defense was very leaky. Dalvin Cook had a ton of big runs, 21 yards. He had a couple 7 to 9 yard runs that were just kind of gashing the Jets. Him and Alexander Madison had the 2 rushing touchdowns on the day. They ended with 3 total touchdowns on the defense. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, they couldn't keep him out of the end zone in this one, although they did hold him to, I believe, 3 catches for 45 yards or something very minimal. He did have the touchdown on DJ Reed. It was a really nice hesitation corner route. DJ Reed stuttered with him and then just couldn't accelerate to get to the corner with him. But was there anybody? Jordan Whitehead, he had a couple big hits on Justin Jefferson. One that got flagged that I thought was complete bullshit. I mean, he led with his shoulder, and
Yeah,
we
yeah,
had
that was
we
garbage.
had guys on the Buffalo Bills even coming out saying like, "What are we supposed to play flag football at this
Right,
point?" So
right,
it's just silly, but that's Cleve Blakeman, and I'm not gonna blame the refs. The Jets need to not put themselves in those situations, but
right.
Cleve Blakeman is. We've talked about it off air. Cleve Blakeman is not a good referee in the NFL, but Quinnen had a sack, a big tackle for loss. Carl had a half sack. And what were your thoughts as a whole on the defense and anything that stuck out to you, good or bad?
I thought Quincy Williams was fantastic. I thought he had a really
Yeah.
nice game for himself.
Mhm.
I think he's kind of solid. We talk a lot about how this team needs to address linebacker in the draft, but I think he eases that a little. I think if anything, you look middle linebacker because of C.J. Mosley getting a little bit long in the tooth,
Mhm.
and I could still see an early pick being used there. I thought Michael Carter played himself a really good game. Huge run stop by Quan Alexander, deep in the Vikings zone and red zone or
Mhm.
deep in their own territory when they were trying to when they were trying to run out the clock and the Jets were trying to get the ball back. He came flying in off the edge and stuffed the back at the goal line or at the line of scrimmage rather. And I thought I hate I'm not a huge fan of using early picks at the safety position, but Lamarcus Joyner, man, like I mean, they could be worse back there, but he's not very good.
Yep.
He's not exactly, they've had worse back there in recent years. He at least makes the occasional play, but really, he had a really tough time. And I know he got smoked on at least one big play in coverage and just didn't have a good day in coverage, didn't have a good day tackling. So he just kind of, to me, highlighted a little bit that when we are talking draft, like I know I'm going to start watching a lot more safeties than I have been. I've been watching a lot of O-line, a lot of linebackers, a lot of receivers.
Mhm.
But I think safety is where the Jets need to be, focused in those first 3 rounds of the draft.
Yeah, and one, not to get too far off topic, but one safety you did talk about, JL Skinner, did get accepted to the Senior Bowl, so that's
Mhm.
somebody I'm very excited to dig into. But yeah, I agree. Well, Marcus Joyner has kind of been the red flag of the defensive secondary. Obviously, he's played every snap or just about every snap this season, which is a complete turnaround from the ACL or Achilles injury he suffered last year. But he is definitely a liability when it comes to tackling. I think he also takes a couple bad angles in the run game. You see him just come downhill too quickly, and then all of a sudden he's beat to the outside. So it's kind of the the problem we had with Ashton Davis back there at safety. He just took bad angles in the run game, but LaMarcus Joyner with the bad tackling on top of it, it's very bad. I don't have his full stats right here in front of me, but it seems like almost every week when I'm filling out like my box score on my computer, it just there's a missed tackle on LaMarcus Joyner's tab almost every single week. And when you don't make any tackles in the game, but you have missed tackles, that's
Yeah.
not good. So
And
I'm sorry,
no,
go.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, so yeah, safety is definitely a position that even maybe play a little bit more Will Parks. I'm not sure. I know that they like to use him in 3 safety sets. So Will Parks is somebody that could also get some more snaps on the defensive side of the ball, I think. But I have it here. Marcus Joyner this season, 4, 1, 1, 2. That's eight missed tackles, and that's not including anything from last week. So
Right.
that's not good from the safety position when you're the last line of defense. So I agree. Safety is definitely a concern. But on the positive side, Quincy Williams, I mean, wow, that was a very good game from him. And
Yeah.
I love this. And this kind of speaks to the offensive chemistry too. Every time Quincy Williams makes a play and he does that signature, like fist up in the air, like Superman
Right.
type thing, all the teammates do it too. Like
Yeah.
they love it. They crowd around him and they just do it too. Sauce was 15 yards away doing it one game
Yep.
and he got a
It gets
tackle
guys
for loss. So
fired up.
I love that they do that around him. And it obviously helps that he and Quinnen are brothers. So it just makes it that much cooler. But for them to both be, hitting their stride down the stretch, I think, yeah, Quincy and Quinnen should definitely get a big payday from the Jets here. But
And
yeah,
I think another negative I meant to touch up. We've talked about it in previous
mhm.
weeks, but as good as this D line has been, like they've got to upgrade that interior D line. On
Oh
the
yeah,
on the second level or on the second group, because Solomon Thomas, again, another really high character guy, but him and Nathan Shepard, just they were getting gashed up the middle. That was a big part of when the damage Dalvin Cook was doing. And Nathan Shepard's weird. Like I feel like in recent weeks I've seen him look a little better at times, like
hmm
but just not consistently enough, for being picked where he was and for the number of snaps he gets. I feel like DT is an area where they could go early on, especially depending on Rankin's situation. With him being on the second year of his deal. I see one of the comments on saying center, QB, and safety. I think center and safety are a given. I think QB is something they pursue in free agency, and if they
hmm
take one in the draft, it's going to be in the middle, the middle rounds. Some of the guys I'd love to see where Jake Hayner goes. I like Jake Hayner, and he's
Yep.
another guy who's got his Senior Bowl. I think he was one of our week one players to watch. I think Hayner was the quarterback.
Yeah, you talked about him super early on. Yep.
Yeah, and it was last year that I saw him that I thought he looked really good. So he's we'll see what happens there. But I think safety, or I think center. I think McGovern is. I think the interior gets upgraded. I wouldn't rule out center, but I think it's a little further down the list. I think guard. Is a bigger priority at the moment.
Yeah, and I don't want to, sit up here and absolutely just kill a player because he really isn't, he's not a complete liability, but he does look pretty bad. And you said it, high character guy, Solomon Thomas. He's actually the Walter Payton Man of the
Yeah,
Year candidate for the Jets. So congrats
deservedly
to
so.
him.
Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah. Everything he does for the foundation is huge. But yeah, I think with like you said, Rankin's going out, his contract expiring. Nathan Shepard, Solomon Thomas, even Quinnen Williams until he gets paid. I mean, he's only here for one more year, so you
he's
do
not
have
going anywhere.
no, absolutely not,
Don't
absolutely not.
believe
Maybe
him.
even 25 million a year at this point. So Solomon Thomas could definitely be upgraded. I don't have any D tackle names off the top of my head, but I know DJ Dale from from Alabama got his Senior Bowl invite, and he was somebody that I didn't really watch in the preseason, but every time you're watching like a Will Anderson, anybody on that defense, Henry Toa, and he's just kind of making plays right there in the middle. I think
Yeah,
he has a weird number too. Like Christian Barmore wore something in the 40s at Alabama. I have a feeling he's in like the weird 40s number two. Like it's just something about him sticks out to me. So it's going to be fun actually with Alabama players in the Senior Bowl because normally they're not. So having DJ Dale and I think 3 other Alabama players getting Senior Bowl invites, it's going to be totally fun to watch. So yeah, D
and I
tackle.
know it doesn't get as much hype, but there's some good names coming across for the East West Shrine Bowl.
Yes. Yep.
In terms of DTs, the guy I mentioned, Nesta Jade Silvera out of Arizona State,
Mm-hmm.
he's going there. Zay Flowers, the receiver I mentioned last week, is going
Yeah.
there.
Yep. I'm excited about
Um,
him.
but there were a few names I saw come across my feed that I thought they're getting sort of a higher quality player than they have in years past, or maybe I just haven't followed it as closely in years past. but they're getting some good names trickling in there with the Shrine Bowl. So I think that's going to be worth keeping an eye on as well. Again, the Senior Bowl is the big one, the high profile, but you still get some good players out of the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, I think year over year at this point, these all-star games are just going to become more and more prevalent, and the big name guys are even going to start going, and even the top quarterbacks eventually to these events, even if it is just for the sake of meeting with the teams and the teams that show up to these events and not doing anything on the field, but just the interview process. Like I believe Hendon Hooker has a pending Senior Bowl invite. So for him to go, even with his torn ACL, just speak to teams and
Yep.
get a feel for how they think about him in the draft. And I just think it's all going to be so important, and year over year, it's going to get so much better. Before we do move on, I do want to talk about special teams because finally, thank the Lord, after all these years, the Jets have a kicker. They have a
Yes, they
special
do.
teams that is competent. Greg the Leg. He hit 5 field goals in this game, including a 60-yarder, which is a franchise record. He had the 57-yarder in the wind against Chicago, or in the rain, which I still think is slightly more impressive. 60 in a dome.
Way more impressive.
So 60 in a dome is, whatever at this point. But for him to get the franchise record, and I mean, he's 4 yards shy of the NFL record that's held by a couple kickers at this point. Just kudos to him. And if this guy does not make the Pro Bowl or the All Pro, like if he doesn't get any honors, I think this is rigged.
It's silly.
Justin Tucker, I think this is the year.
That's the thing, though. Tucker, I haven't looked at Tucker's name, but
I haven't either. But
his numbers. But these are things like Pro Bowl, All Pro. That's why sometimes it takes guys you'll have a guy who deserves it a few years that he doesn't make it, and then on the back end he'll make it when he doesn't deserve it because it becomes a reputation thing.
Yep.
Like, oh, well, we got to put this guy in. He's so and so. Like they don't
been
even
there the last 5. Yep.
Yeah, it's this guy. I remember the first time I saw that probably as a young fan was like the last couple that Lawrence Taylor made, and people were like, is he still LT? Is he still playing at that level? And it's like, yeah, but he's Lawrence Taylor. You can't not put him in.
Yeah.
So it's like you miss something you deserve and you make something you don't. But I think all the talk with Sauce, maybe he goes, but I think that I think Zerline, man, he's got to get a shot. And I think, if I'm the Jets, the way he's kicking the ball right now, you just mentioned the all-time record. At some point before the season is over, I'm giving him a shot at like a 68-yarder just to say, hey, man, let's see if we can get, because both those kicks he made would have been good from 70. Like, I mean, they were boom through. So if I'm the Jets, I'm going to go ahead, give it a shot and see if you can put your name in the record books.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in like a fourth quarter situation, even if I don't care if there's sportsmanship involved. Like, just go for the record. Why not? I mean, your name is Greg.
The half, game's no longer in doubt. Something like that.
Exactly. Your name is Greg the Leg. You got to at least try for the record.
It's a 73-yarder. Go ahead.
It's unfortunate that this was their only dome game of the season, because I feel like if they had one more down the stretch, he would definitely have that chance. But perhaps in the playoffs, I'm not sure. Are there any playoff teams in the AFC right now that have a dome? I don't think so. So it might not happen. Even if the Jets do make the playoffs, it might not happen. But nonetheless, Greg the Leg, way deserving, especially, from what we've had historically since Jason Myers and Nick Folk at the kicker position. To get Greg the Leg on a free agency is just an absolute steal. So kudos to Joe Douglas on that one. We can transition into the Bills. I see a lot of comments here about the draft and what a lot of people want to do. So we can kind of breeze through the Bills preview. I mean, I'm not sure what else to say. I know we talked about it slightly off air, but I understand that they won the game the first time, 20-17 in their home. They disrupted Josh Allen. They got him to throw 2 uncharacteristic interceptions, I should say. But Josh Allen, he is Josh Allen, and the Bills offense is going to do what they're going to do at the end of the day. Does that mean the Jets are going to get blown out? No, absolutely not. Does it mean that they should be favorited to win? No. And I think that the sports books have them at like 8.5-point underdogs, which is a bit much. I think 8.5 is
9.5, but I haven't seen.
Is it 9.5? Wow. So
it opened at 9.5.
Oh, okay.
At all.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would have advocated to take them at 9.5 or 8.5. So I think it's way too big of a spread, even though Buffalo is home. They did lose Von Miller for the season. They thought that they put him on IR for 4 games, and they thought it was a smaller knee injury. Turns out during the exploratory surgery that it was a torn ACL, so he's on the shelf for the year. And if Jets fans do remember back to week 9, he did make the impact strip sack on Zach Wilson coming out of the 20-minute Skycam timeout. And that kind of dictated a little bit of the second half until the Jets obviously won the game, but it looked very bleak at that moment when Von Miller strip sacked Zach Wilson and the Bills got the
Mhm.
ball in that first meeting. So I would hope that they don't keep it as close. Maybe Mike White can give them a better shot to pull away if the defense is playing lights out like they were the first time. But we can just jump right to it. Was there any, matchups or notes outside of, Stephon Diggs and Sauce Gardner that you wanted to highlight for this matchup and just give a quick prediction?
Well, look, I just I think even with Von Miller out, I think Buffalo has some guys up front who can cause some problems.
Yeah.
Um, Carlos Basham is a guy that I loved coming out of college. I tweeted out a bunch about him as a guy I hope the Jets would take. AJ Epineza, probably I wasn't probably as high in Epineza as I was Carlos Basham, but those two guys, I don't think they get enough love for what they do, and I worry with these. I don't know how many weeks you can expect this Jets tackle situation to hold up. Of course, now Max Mitchell done for the year.
Yes.
Robert Saleh initially didn't say, but now Connor Hughes today said they found blood clots and
Oh, shit.
yeah, they discovered blood clots. Which there was a kid out of Troy, the offensive lineman the Jets picked up. Patriots drafted him, cut him. Jets picked him up. He took a season off. Like the Pats drafted him, and then he had a full year off because of blood clots. And I think they reemerged, or it could have been poor play. I don't know. He was out of the league shortly. So that is the case with Max Mitchell. So hopefully they get that cleared up. It is treatable, but it can also be recurring. So now you're without Mitchell again. And the tackle situation is just unbelievable. I mean, kudos to Joe Douglas. I mean, could you
Seriously.
imagine, a few years ago, the Jets starting tackles weren't as good as their current sixth and seventh tackles. Like, could
Mhm.
you imagine if they lost 7 tackles 5 or 6 years ago when it was Kelvin Beachum and Brandon Shell starting?
Ben Igelana.
Yeah, exactly. Like you thought it was bad when you were down to your third tackle back then. So it's just nuts. You lost AVT, you lost everybody. The last men standing are Dwayne Brown and now George Fant is back. Who's to say he stays healthy? Mike Remmers, who I don't think has played a snap yet, has he?
No.
He's the
Been on the
swing
active
guy
roster
now.
for like 6 weeks, though.
Right. He's been on the roster, but he hasn't played. But now he's the swing. So that's what worries me is this matchup against these tackles. There is no, at least last week, excuse me, at least when Mitchell started, it was like, well, if there's a hiccup or if he struggles, you can go to Fant. Now there
Mhm.
is no, well, you can go to, it's like, oh, damn, now you
Yeah.
have to go. Now you have to go to Remmers if someone gets hurt. Looked at the free agent list. It's Eric Fisher's been out there for a while. I was curious why the Jets hadn't brought him in sooner. And the Dolphins signed him, 2-3 days ago to because they had when Armstead got hurt for them at tackle.
Yes. Yep.
So now they go out and they get Fisher. Darrell Williams is an interesting guy, a former Bill. Like he's
Mhm.
still young enough. He's got a ton of starting experience, and nobody's calling him. Like again, he's one. And I'm not saying he's a bad dude. I'm just saying when I see guys that young who sit home that long waiting for the phone to ring, I'm like something's up. Maybe it could be work ethic. I don't know. I don't know what
Mhm.
it is. But a player who is as good as he is with the experience he has, who's played at the level he has, should not be sitting at home on the couch. But he
Right.
is, and the Jets haven't. Nobody's called him. So a little bit puzzling there. But that's my biggest concern going into this game is the Jets tackles matching up against the Bills D line.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see those names floating out there in free agency and just the wondering about why. I mean, even with a polarizing guy like Odell Beckham, I mean, we all know he was injured, but it's like, oh, he's about to sign with the team, but now the Cowboys are a little suspicious that he might not even play this season. So, like, there's always some weird things going on with these guys once they sit home for a little bit. So, yeah, that was definitely interesting. And yeah, Mike Remmers as the swing tackle makes me very nervous. Obviously, if anything happens to Dwayne Brown or George Fant, that's what we have to go to. Or I mean,
Yeah.
Laurent Tardif was elevated from the practice squad. I know he's an interior player, but I mean, at this point, we've used interior players on a tackle before in AVT, and it worked. Not saying it should be the fix, but I mean, this is something that certainly could derail the playoff push. And it makes me nervous that going up against these teams
Absolutely.
like Buffalo, Miami, even Detroit with Aiden Hutchinson down the stretch, I don't think Seattle has many edge guys that really intimidate you, but you're playing teams that have good edge presences. down the stretch. And when you're in almost must-win situations, this is almost playoff territory every single week. Having your bookend tackles one slight injury, and you got a guy who's resting every single week, Wednesday and Thursday in a shoulder rehab program. So you're already walking a thin line with Dwayne Brown. So George Fant has put 2 stints on the injury report already this year. So you're walking a thin line. I think the Bills have what it takes to, outmatch the tackle position. But at the same time, I think Mike White is shown that he can get the ball out fast enough to mitigate the pass rush. Obviously, that speaks more to your receivers and playmakers getting open. And against this Bills secondary that is now way more healthy than it was when we saw them in week 9. I believe they have Jordan Poyer and Tre'Davious White back. So they're getting healthy down the stretch. It makes it very tough. I'll give my prediction. I was completely wrong last week, and I made myself like an idiot thinking that we were going to hold the Vikings to 10 points. But I'm gonna say it's another high scoring game, 31-28. I'm gonna go with the Bills winning. The Bills are home. I mean, it's a tough place to play. Mike White, obviously, he struggled last year against them, and I'm not going to hold that against him this year. But I think until we see Mike White against this team, it's really hard to predict the Jets to win in this situation.
Yeah, I can't see how you can, pick the Jets to win this week. And you worry, again with the I think Mike White's going to see a lot more pressure than he has in recent weeks. Maybe you can offset. See, again, the thing is though, and this is the good thing, is that with Zach Wilson, you couldn't offset that with a screen game because he couldn't throw a screen pass.
Right.
Mike White, again, 2 weeks in a row, we see it early drives. It's crazy because it's such a simple thing, right? It's like the easiest pass a quarterback is going to throw. And the difference between a back having to go out into the flat and then adjust his, like that split second that he has to stop, to slow down, adjust, that gives the defense an extra step to get there.
Yep.
But when it's Mike White, these guys don't break stride. They just go out on the swing, and the ball is just waiting for them when they get to their spot. And it just hits them, and they can keep moving forward. And it's a tiny thing, but it's the difference between no gain and an 8-yard gain. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And if you want to go crazy and try to blitz and take advantage of the Jets O-line, I mean, the worrying thing is they might not have to blitz, but if you choose to go blitz heavy on a team like this, and especially with what we've seen what these backs can do with receivers out of the backfield, I think that it's going to be it'll present some opportunities for the Jets, but I still see the Bills winning this one. I'm going to say, I hope I'm wrong, but I'm going to say 27-14 Bills.
Oh, okay. So definitely a bigger margin of victory for the Bills there. I mean, it's realistic. I mean, the Jets have so many question marks, and you're going up against a perennial powerhouse now in Buffalo, and they've now overtaken the number 1 seed thanks to Cincinnati beating the Kansas City Chiefs, which is a bad thing for the Jets' playoff hopes. And as you mentioned at the top, I don't think the Chargers or the Patriots or the Raiders are really threatening to take that 7th seed, but it's always something to watch because if the Jets continue to slide and lose these games, it's not going to be easy to continue having that game advantage. And you don't have the tiebreaker against New England. So it's really New England that you're watching. And then I mentioned the Chargers. So that's going to do it for the Bills preview. I mean, unless you had anything else, we can move on to the draft. I wasn't able to save your videos that you sent me unless you're able to pull them up real quick while I'm talking about my guys, but I don't have the video.
Excuse me. I should be able to I'll only be able to pull up one, the Hall sack from last year against Evan Neal.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with, I watched 2 edge guys this weekend. Derek Hall from Auburn, both are Senior Bowl guys. I feel like at this point, I'm only going to be watching Senior Bowl guys because they're the first ones that I'm going to get exposed to in February in the draft process. Oh, okay, cool. You sent it here. Let me add it to the stream. And the first guy I watched was Auburn edge defender Derek Hall. You see him right here against Alabama coming around the left tackle and taking down Bryce Young. In the 4th quarter of a 10-0 ball game, if you can see the bottom of the screen there, Auburn was in a situation where they had to, put away Alabama, and they kind of rely on Derek Hall in these moments. He's a stand-up outside linebacker, but sometimes they do stack him over the guard who might play a little bit of inside. It's very rare, but they do move him around a little bit. He drops into coverage, again, very rare. He's more of a pass rush guy. I watched him against Penn State, Missouri, and Ole Miss. So against Penn State, I saw him against left tackle Olu Fashanu, a guy that I've highlighted already on this show. And he gave Olu Fashanu a couple fits. I believe he had 1.5 sacks or 2 full sacks against Fashanu, a couple good pressures. So he did really good against what I think is top tier tackle talent. I mean, he's going back to school, but Fashanu was looked at as one of the top tackle talents in the draft if he had declared. Just super long. He has a really good long arm move that he used against the left tackle of Missouri for a sack. He has good swipe and shed against left tackle, the left tackle for Missouri again for another big tackle for loss. So Derek Hall is somebody that I'm really interested to dive more in. I've only gotten 3 games in. But the other edge guy I have, another Clemson guy. It's funny. I feel like I've mentioned every guy on the Clemson defense at this point this season, at least on their defensive line. Brian Brzee. I think I might have mentioned Tyler Davis, Miles Murphy. I talked about all of their backers, some of their secondary members, but KJ Henry, another edge defender for them, 6'4", 260, a long pass rusher with really good instincts. He's a stand-up or hand-in-the-dirt 5 tech. So to me, that says more of a 4-3 defensive end with his size and measurables and his length. I think he's more of a 4-3 D end than a 3-4 outside linebacker. He had a good dip and rip move, a nice 2-handed swipe, a really good spin against NC State. And this is NC State from this year, not last year, so it was not against Ike Ekwonu. But by the 3rd game of KJ Henry, the first thing I wrote in my notes against South Carolina was situational pass rusher with a question mark. I'm not sure if he's going to be somebody that's going to give you presence on all 3 phases or all 3 downs of defense, including the run game. He can make plays for Clemson. He did do well against the run, but that's not to say he can do it at the NFL level consistently. He is a Senior Bowl guy, so I'm very excited to see if he is able to improve his stock a bit, as well as Derek Hall. So the edge rushers seem to always have an advantage in the one-on-ones versus O-line and D-line at the Senior Bowl. So those 2 guys are guys that I'm definitely watching. Who you got over there, Glenn?
I don't know if that clip came through yet. That's KJ Henry.
Oh, you got one for Henry? Oh, okay,
yeah,
perfect.
I didn't realize I had it.
Yeah, here we go. KJ Henry's number 5. Yep, there he is. Oh, this is the NC State game. Okay, yep, nice tackle for loss.
Yeah, as you were saying it, I was like, I think that's the actual clip I have on him.
Yep. I believe I wrote this down in my notes too. Yep, this is one of the plays. I believe he takes out the sniffer. Yep, that's the play. KJ Henry. I feel like even though they have so much talent on the defensive line, KJ Henry, is somebody that is going to get his name out there in the draft process, and Mobile is going to be the first start for him to just increase his stock there.
Yeah, so I'm only going to mention one guy today.
Okay.
We are, we're up against time, but
Yep.
Not a big deal. Another guy, he's actually he's accepted his Senior Bowl invite, number 64, offensive lineman for Ole Miss, Nick Brocker.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy that I first noticed last year. I can't remember if you and I discussed him briefly. I thought I may have sent you a couple of shots on him, but you can see him slam the D lineman to the turf on that play. He's a really physical guy, moves well, and he's got a ton of experience there. So I'm excited. He's one of these linemen that I'm excited to watch. And again, having mentioned earlier, the fact that the Jets are probably going to be in a position where they're going to be drafting, at least one offensive lineman. Brocker is a guy to look out for. Ole Miss, man, they just okay. I didn't realize that the sharing thing. We'll discuss that offline. But yeah, Brocker's my guy for this week. Unfortunately, not a lot of football games left to watch these guys, but that's what YouTube's for. And those of us who are a little bit obsessed with the draft will be watching many, many, many hours of college football between now and the start of the between now and the NFL draft.
Yeah, I love this big gap between now and the bowl games because it really gives you a moment to collect yourself, get a couple players watched before, the big, top dogs really face off in the college football playoffs. And I'm doing this live on the air first time. I have not checked Tankathon. I have no idea where the Jets pick. I obviously know they're in the playoffs, but
I looked the other day. I think it's 22.
Yeah. Okay. So according to Tankathon, they are picking 22nd in the draft, and all the guys that I think we mentioned there, I mean, maybe some KJ Henry, possibly not, but Derek Hall, absolutely a back end of the first round type player. Broker, I'm not sure if he's going to get his
Yeah,
name
he
up
won't be
there
a
or
first
not, but
round guy. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think he will. But offensive line in general, the guy from Florida, I'm blanking on it. I talked about Torrance. He could be a guy to talk about at the end of the
Well,
first
Cyrus
round.
Torrance.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so these guys, offensive line is going to be a position that the Jets defensive line as well. We brought trench players like this is Joe Douglas and Rob Sala's bread and butter. If they don't take these guys within the first 4 rounds, I would be surprised. At
Yeah.
least at the positions, obviously not our guys, but to take an edge rusher to supplement what you have, you can never have enough. And I think Carl Lawson's been too hit or miss to solidify him as your true first pass rusher. You're going to need more ammo in that arsenal. And offensive line, we've seen it. They've been back up against the wall for all season with offensive line rotations. So great call by you to bring him to the table. And that's going to do it for our show. I know we went a little bit over because we started a little late. Thank you, everybody, for being patient with our technical difficulties. For Glenn, you can follow him on Twitter at AceFan23. You can also follow his draft account that he's launching. He'll be posting plenty of clips on all these players. All the clips that you see us post up here, he'll definitely post on Twitter at JetsPicks, at Jets Picks. Definitely give that one a follow. We're gonna be really excited to pump out all that content for
Yeah.
draft specific things, and we'll give it a Jets flair, obviously, because that's what we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. But it's going to be, I'm going to be shooting out guys who I know the Jets have no interest in taking. But it's just about guys, as I watch games, guys that jump out and that are
Yep.
impressive, or guys that make the news for one reason or another. I'll hopefully build up a big enough database that I'll have most college players covered, and I'll have a few of their, better plays ready to pull and shoot out as they become noteworthy.
Exactly. And I'd be surprised if, maybe the 6th or 7th round guys, but through the 5th round, I feel confident that if the Jets took almost any player at this point, you have a clip on him. So they will definitely find their way to Twitter via the Jets Picks account. You can follow me at Tereman on Twitter. Obviously, I don't know who they're playing, but let's root against the Chargers. Let's root against the Patriots. Obviously, the Dolphins, they lost to the 49ers and Brock Purdy, but I think they have an easier game this week, but we still got to root for them to lose. Let's go. We got to beat the Bills. We got to sweep them for the first time since, I believe, 2016. So a lot of good things could come out of this. Obviously, it's not the end of the world if they lose, but a big game coming up for the Jets here. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate all your live comments. We really appreciate it. We're definitely going to do another fan mailbag toward the end of the season here, maybe even a playoff mailbag. So
And probably get a little more interactive once we're doing draft stuff, because people have a lot of thoughts on the draft.
Oh yeah, and everybody's, their draft takes are always going to pull us in different directions where, somebody says O-line, somebody says safety, and it's going to be great from that perspective. So thanks again for everybody for tuning in, and until next time, let's go Jets.